So, good afternoon, everyone. Uh, Today, we shall see the main feature of C++, namely the object-oriented paradigm that is supported in C++. That is where C++ immensely differs from C. So, what we saw in our previous lecture were similar features of C, just that they were enhanced a little bit. But what makes C++ different is this object-oriented feature. So, when we come to object-oriented programming, we always talk about classes. So let's look at the definition of a class. Class is a template to create objects. Now, you might have had the experience that whenever you want to build a house, you will have a blueprint or the drawing on which you will indicate everything where how many bedrooms you have, how is the parking area and all that. So that drawing is the template. It's not the building itself, but when you create the house or when you build the house, those houses are called as objects. So class only defines how the objects would look like when they are created. So object is different and class is different. Okay, so remember class is only a template. Okay, and object is what comes out of a class definition. So you can say object is an instance of a class. Okay, now to illustrate this concept of a class and object, I have taken example of a circle, and the process of creating objects from a class is called instantiation. Okay, in this sense, the instance of a class very well fits the definition of a object. Now let's see how do we define a class. Now class is defined with the keyword class and then followed by the name of the class. And then we begin the class definition with the flower bracket. So this is similar to your struct. Instead of class, there you are saying struct and then the name of the structure. Whereas you have to use the keyword class and give the name to the class and then open a flower bracket, and within the opening closing flower bracket you have to define what are called as member variables. Okay, and along with the member variables you will also define what are called as methods. So a class comprises of member variables and methods. If you visualize the class as a rectangular box here, once the definition is ready, so class has to be defined. So once you define the class, we can create the objects, as many objects as you want. And each object will be distinct from the other in terms of its properties. So for instance, the radius of this yellow circle may be smaller, maybe let us say 3. Whereas this is a slightly bigger circle, the radius of this can be 5. Okay, and this is even smaller than the first one, so this can be radius 2. Similarly, I can define color of the circle just like that. Okay, so string color, and this can be of yellow color, this can be of red color, this can be of green color. Okay, so a class comprises of member variables, okay, and methods. Okay, these member variables are also called as properties. Okay, as you can see, radius is a property of a circle. Similarly, the color of the circle is also property of the circle. And the methods are called as behaviors. Behaviors because you are performing some actions. That is, you may compute area of a circle, or you may display the entire circle properties, or you may change the color of the circle at runtime. All those things are possible here. Okay, so we shall see a more concrete example. For now, we need to understand that class is a template or a blueprint that defines how the objects would look like when they are created. So after defining the class, you have to create the objects. Okay, so let's see more concrete examples of these. For instance, I have defined a class circle here, and for circle we require radius as one of the property. All right. Along with the radius, you can as well define the pi value. Remember in C we were defining pi value as a constant. You can do that right inside the circle class. And there is a special function called as constructor, which will help you to initialize the member variables. Like the radius can be initialized to some value the user passes in the main function. And by default, everything inside a class is private. It means no function outside this class can access the private members. For example, radius cannot be accessed from outside the circle class. Constructors and any methods that you write, they will all be public. As you can see, if we put a public colon, it means everything that follows will be public. You did not write public for the constructor separately, public for the method separately. Once you write public colon, everything else becomes public. Okay, and before this, whatever is defined will all be private. So we shall see how we can define the members as public, private, or protected, and when to declare private, when to declare protected, we shall see subsequently. For now, what you need to remember is that you have to define a class using the class keyword and the name of the class, and within the opening closing flower brackets, okay, you have to define the member variables, a constructor, and whatever methods that you want the class to have. So as you can see, a class would contain two parts: data members and member functions. Okay, so this is the complete structure of a class. It will always have two parts: data members, or these are called as properties, and we'll have member functions, which are called as methods, and they define behavior of the objects. Okay, and if you enclose data and functions together inside a class, that concept is called as encapsulation. Okay, you might have seen the capsules that come, the doctors prescribe some capsules, right? So capsule contains ingredients. So the ingredients of the encapsulation are the data members and the member functions. So there is a larger philosophy behind why they want to combine data and member functions together inside a class. Now, when you build very large software, suppose you use C programming to do that, you will have all functions all over the place, and the data will also be all over the place. And some data members, when you print, if you are not getting the expected value, finding out which functions are affecting that data becomes very difficult. So debugging becomes a tedious task if you go with functional programming. And if you encapsulate data and member functions, you know that these are the only functions which can access the data members. No other functions outside this class can access these data members. So debugging becomes more localized. That is, you need to check only these functions. That if anything is going wrong with these data members, you need to look at only these member functions. And you don't have to worry about any functions which are defined outside this class or in other classes which might be present in your application. All right. So we have a concept of a class which encloses data and functions together. Class will have constructors. Now, constructor is a special function that is used only to initialize the data members. And there can be three types of constructors. First one is the default constructor. Second one is the parameterized constructor. And third one is the copy constructor. So what are these different types of constructors? How to use them to initialize the data members? We shall see shortly. Along with the class may contain a destructor also. Now, any data member which is receiving data dynamically at runtime, the data has to be freed, and that part of the data member which is dynamically allocated memory can be freed inside the destructor. And constructor and destructors automatically run. You don't have to call them from anywhere. So when the class variable goes out of the scope, that is when you exit from main function, the destructor is automatically called, and any memory that is allocated will be freed up. Okay. So we shall see the use of destructors when we actually implement example class like circle. Now object can be created using two methods. One is called as stack allocation method. Second one is called heap allocation method. Now after defining the circle class, I have to create object. I told you that objects have to be created, only then the methods can be executed and also the results can be got. So how do I create objects of a class? You simply have to use the name of the class and some variable, and if you are initializing the member variables, you have to pass the parameters here. Now if you only say circle c1 bracket some parameter like radius of a circle, this object will be created on the stack. However, if I use a pointer circle star p and use operator new, then say circle 5, this object will be created on the heap. Okay, so creating objects on the stack has its own advantages. Creating the object on the heap has its own advantages. We shall see them subsequently, when to use stack allocation and when to use a heap allocation. Now, uh, having understood what classes are and what objects are and what is the process of creating objects from a class, now let us see the demonstration of this with an example. The first thing is you create a file, and then here I would create the basic code. Now we can define the classes in the header section. So let us take the example of circle class and define the member variables. So we know in uh, radius can be int. You can take float as well if you wish. So let me change a little bit radius, and we can define the pi value as well, which is 3.142 float, and this being constant, I can prefix this with const. Okay, and the radius can be initialized right here, or it can be done inside the constructor. So we shall see three places where the member variables can be initialized. So let us do it with the constructor. Now before you write the constructor, you have to use the keyword public colon, so that constructor becomes accessible outside the class. So here the name of the constructor should be same as that of the class, circle opening bracket. So default constructor does not take any arguments, and you need to put a flower bracket here and then say rad equal to some fixed value. This semicolon should be inside this. So this is the first constructor, and I can have second constructor which takes or the argument, and then within flower bracket again you can use rad equal to r. So I have two constructors in this class. One is the default constructor, and this is called as parameterized constructor. So class can have many constructors. So in this case only one data member is there, so I have only one parameterized constructor. To define the behavior of this class, I can have a method like we want to compute the area. So compute area is one method which will perform some action on the data member. Now if you wanted, if you could have added one more data member like color of the circle. So here by default the color can be set to red, let us say. This is a possibility. And in the parameterized constructor you could send an argument C, which you can assign to color of the circle C. Now computing the area of the circle, you know it is pi star rad star rad, and since it is returning a value, there should be a return keyword. All right, and if you want to display everything about the circle, you could have one more method, display, which will print radius equal to rad, and then color equal to whatever color. Now observe one thing, that even though rad and color are private, they are accessible to all the methods in the class. That compute can access rad, display can access rad as well as color. Okay, so anywhere in the class these member variables are accessible, but they are not accessible anything outside the class. And one most important thing is the class should end with a semicolon. Okay, otherwise you will see a red color mark on the int of main. Now once the class is ready, now preparing a class, no memory is allocated. It is just a template. It tells how the objects will have their memory allocated. Now here if I say circle C1 and pass some value, let us say 5 point or rather 7.0, you have to pass the color of the circle also. Okay, so I would pass red. Okay, so the number of arguments in the constructor should match the arguments that are passing here. So once the object is created, now I can execute the methods. I can say compute area. Now this is going to return me some value. Either I can store it in a local variable or I can directly see out it. So you can write area equal to. Similarly, if you want to display everything about the circle, dot display itself is not returning anything. So that is why it was giving error. You simply have to call c1 dot display. Okay, don't see out this output of this function, because display is not returning anything. Compute area is returning something. That is why I could do see out here. All right. So now if I run the program, and you will see area equal to 153.958, radius 7, color of the circle is red. So any questions here?
No, sir. We will try it.
Yeah, you try this out. I will give you some time.
Sure.
Okay, so before you start, one small thing, that as I told you, radius is private to the class. What does that mean? Is that I cannot access rad outside the class. That is, in main you cannot write like this. If you ever try, it says member circle rad is inaccessible. Do you see this? I cannot access it in main. Similarly, the pi value also you cannot access. It gives red color. Okay. However, all methods which are public are accessible in main. Okay. So by default, all member variables will be private and all methods will be public. That is what you must take care. So just give a try and experience for yourself how a class has to be constructed and how the objects are created and how the execution happens.
So same thing works in online compiler, right?
Yeah, yeah. You can use on GDB online compiler. It works. So these are member variables. They are the properties of the objects. Whereas these are methods of the class, and they define the behavior. You can also write private by default. Can you come again?
Seventh line. Why do we write public?
Yeah, here. Okay. See, everything is by default private. Suppose if I remove this public here,
Okay.
okay, you cannot access the constructor. See, it comes with a red line.
Okay.
Okay, you cannot access the compute area also.
Computer. Okay.
You cannot access display. All will become private. So everything private, what will you do? You cannot
Correct.
use
Okay.
the the definitions. You cannot use the
Okay.
objects, right? So some things have to be public. So constructors and all the methods will be public, and data members can be public, private, or protected. So we shall see them later. Okay, so it means if I write public here also, then radius and color will also become public. As you can see, if you come down here, you can access the radius directly. If you say c1.rad, it works.
Okay.
Okay. But this violates the principle of encapsulation. So there are four pillars of object-oriented programming. One is abstraction, second is encapsulation, third is polymorphism, fourth one is inheritance. So all these four principles have to be adhered to whenever you are building any software using object-oriented concepts.
Okay.
So don't use public here.
Okay.
At the most you can do protected. So when you do protected, what happens is only the subclass which inherits from circle can access these members. Okay, so we shall see more of those things subsequently.
Okay.
For now, keep data members private and constructors and methods public.
Okay.
So one thing,
Yeah.
can we have default value set in any of the constructor? Like,
Yeah, you can. That is what is done in the default constructor. No, radius is 5. It means if you don't pass anything, suppose if I create one more object here, circle C2, and don't pass anything. Okay, so what do you think? What will happen?
it will print the default, right? Radius.
No,
It will,
one more object will be created whose radius will be 5 only, and color will be
no, fine.
always red.
Okay.
These are the default values. So now if you execute compute area and
Sir, I have given like this in the constructor. I just pinged.
what do you want me to check in this?
No, sir. Sir, in the constructor, I am passing a default value which will override right? Like in that parameterized constructor. This is the parameterized constructor, right?
Oh, okay. You are saying C equal to pink, the default value.
Yeah.
I think so. That should also be possible. Yeah. It means if you don't pass the color, it will be a simple pink. Yeah, that should be possible. You can just try out all those possibilities. For now, I'm just mentioning that we have parameterized constructors being called. What you're saying is if I make it pink here, and if I don't pass anything, I mean second argument is not passed, so the color should be pink. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see whether that happens. Yes, that is correct. Okay, so default parameters could be passed to constructors and also to any of the methods if they are taking any arguments. We shall see more of these things. So in principle, you understood what is a class?
Yes.
And what are objects? Okay, so the objects are created only in main. That C1 is an object. Okay, now objects can be created in another way also. That is, now if I say circle C1 in bracket 7, and also if you want to send the color, this will be created on stack. Okay, and if you want to create object on the heap, then you have to say circle C2. You should use a pointer, in this case C2 equal to new circle, and then pass whatever arguments you want to pass. Let's say 6.0, and then let us say orange. Okay, so C2 receives its object from the heap. This will be created on the heap. Now they use heap because managing memory dynamically is more efficient first place, and also in heap search insertion becomes very easy. Okay, so the time required to search for an object in a heap and also insert delete in the heap is a lot easier than doing it on a stack. So once you have this kind of object, now how do I call the methods? We cannot use the dot operators now. You have to use the arrow operator. So area C2 equal to C2 arrow compute area. So as you can see, automatically that arrow will come. Okay, and then cout. The cout is not required now. just C2 arrow display. Okay, so if the object is on the heap, you should use the arrow notation to access the methods that are there in the class.
So how to deallocate the memory?
Okay, I'll come to that. Yeah, now this is working fine. Now just that once the okay, but C2 will not be deallocated automatically. You have to delete it. You have to say delete C2. Okay, only then the memory allocated to C2 will be reclaimed. There is no difference in the output, but the memory which was dynamically allocated here using the new operator will be reclaimed only when you say delete C2, deallocate memory. So these are some of the variations you must be aware of. That is how to create object on the stack and how to create object on the heap. So if whenever you want to create on the heap, you must use a pointer variable of the circle class and then use new operator and call either the default constructor or parameterized constructor.
To use to define whether we want to get the memory allocated on stack or heap.
Huh.
How do we come to conclusion on what cases we need to do that?
Okay. See, now that normally happens. Suppose in a bigger application, this is just a simplistic example. Now let's say you have a bank and you have branches. Now, when you create branches for a bank, you don't know how many branches will come up in future, right? So if you use an array of branches that is going to be on stack and it is going to be there. Suppose if you create 100 branches, all 100 branches will be created for you on the stack. And when the program ends, it will go out of scope, that is fine. But unnecessarily you are allocating memory for 100 branches. The more efficient way of doing it is using the heap. If whenever a new branch is added, only then you create a branch and then allocate memory. There are situations where you know for sure the number is small and it's not going to increase or decrease, then you go for stack allocation. But if you don't know prior that the number either going to increase or decrease, then you go for heap allocation, right? So dynamically you can adjust the size of the, but with heap allocation, it is your responsibility to delete the memory allocation. Cat or dog, whatever. Let's take dog because it is dog's day today. Supreme Court has come up with a verdict, a class dog. So then you can define the name as one thing, then possibly its age, and in the public part we can add the constructor dog. In the default you can name as Tommy and let us say age as 10. Okay, and you can have a parameterized constructor also, string n comma int age. Initialize the member variables. That is, we can use this notation, that is name bracket n. This is also another way, comma age bracket n and then opening closing flower bracket. Okay, there should be a colon here. That's the only requirement. This should be a, but this last opening closing flower bracket is required. So you could have initialized name and age inside this flower bracket also. You could have done something like this: name equal to n semicolon age equal to a. You could have done this. Okay, but there is an alternative notation available or approach available where you can say member variable bracket the argument that is come through the constructor, again member variable argument a which has come through the constructor. Like this also you can initialize. This is called as constructor inline initialization. And if you initialize anything here, let us say this is called as in class initialization. And what you have done here in the default constructor is called as constructor initialization. So member variables can be initialized in three different ways. One is in class initialization, right at the variable declaration you can initialize. You can do that with age also, so that only one can be initialized, and inside the constructor you can initialize. That's constructor initialization. And another notation is constructor inline, that is after the constructor put a colon here, then use the member variable name, in this case is a name only, and in bracket the argument, and like this. Okay, now this is the property of the animal. Now behavior is normally behavior of a dog is bark or run, right? So you can have speak or bark, whatever. You have to give a cout. I can only bark as I cannot speak. So this is the behavior of the animal. Similarly, run. Yes, I can run. As you can see, these are the behaviors of the objects when they are created. And what you have done here are the properties of the objects. And don't forget to put a semicolon here. Now to create an object, I just have to say dog d bracket some name, then whatever its age, let's say 7 or 3 age. So we have one dog created. You can make this dog either speak or run. First make it run and then speak. So this is another example just for practice that you are acquainted with how member variables are declared, how they are initialized within the constructor, either in the default constructor or parameterized constructor. And again, here it is whether constructor initialization or constructor inline initialization. So these variations are possible. And if I run this program, you will see both the methods are executed. So as you can see, the name and age are encapsulated inside the class, and these member variables can be accessed only by the methods which are part of this. Okay, and if you want to display the name of the dog, you can say name here, and you can say my name is, and here you can say, so I'm putting age in between these two strings so that when you run the program it will display output like this. So with this example, it's clear why the member variables are called as properties and why the methods are called as behaviors. Okay, so if you can think of your programs as classes and objects, managing large amount of code becomes a lot easier. And it is an experience of, let's say, last 30-40 years that all major softwares are built using object-oriented concepts. So C++ is extensively used. You take your browsers like Microsoft Edge or Chrome, they are using C++. You take database platforms like Oracle or MySQL, C++ is extensively used. The entire Windows operating system is built using C++. Okay, so there is a famous library in Microsoft called as MFC, Microsoft Foundation Course Classes. So it's a huge set of libraries using which you can build, okay, all kinds of applications, right? So C++ has a major role in most of the products that you use on a day-to-day basis. So learning C++ is very important from that point of view as well. Okay.
Sir, how that the second variable is not passed? Can you just run that without passing a age?
This one.
Yeah. Below when you are defining an
Okay,
object, right?
okay. If I don't pass age, it should take default as 10, right?
Yes.
Okay. No, the default is in default constructor. I should have put that default age here. I am using parameterized constructor. No.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so now if I don't pass age here, it should show me the age as 10. Isn't it?
Okay. Okay.
And if you don't pass anything at all, then
That takes a default
that
constructor,
will
right?
call the default constructor.
Okay.
Okay, so if you want to use default constructor, just like that.
No parenthesis
Yeah,
needed for that.
no parenthesis needed. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so my name is Vicky is coming, right? So default constructor, if you're using, don't put brackets.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So what we learned today, to summarize, is that a class is a blueprint for creating objects, and objects are called as instances of the class. So you need to create the objects using the class definition in main and then execute the methods. So class would contain data members which are by default private, and methods will all be public. So the methods which are used to initialize the data members, they are called as constructors. Constructors should have exactly the same name as the class name, and these constructors can be either default constructor or parameterized constructor. Default constructors, you can assign fixed values like these, whereas in parameterized constructor, you can keep both of them with some default values, or keep them open so that the values have to be compulsorily passed for initialization. And the member initialization can be done at three places. One is at the point of declaring the variables. This is called as in-class initialization. Second one is inside the constructor, and third one is constructor in line. That is in line with the constructor definition with a colon. You have to do the initialization, and the methods have all to be public again. So methods define the behavior of the objects when they are created, and methods have to be written after the constructors, and you can invoke those methods when the objects are created. All right. So are you clear with the concept of a class and object, and what member variables are, what constructors are, and what methods are?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you want me to take more examples, or this is good enough?
More examples.
Okay, more examples. So let's take a more concrete one so that. Yeah. So we have seen student class. Okay. Here we can define student properties like his name, Then let us say he has university number which is alphanumeric. Then possibly he is in some semester and he is taken some branch and float is CGPA. Okay, so these are the 4 or 5 properties of the student. These are the member variables. Now, how do I write the constructor for these? First thing is put the public keyword, then you define the default constructor. It is not that you have to define default constructor always. Okay, but if you don't define, you cannot use default constructor. So here you have to define the constructor with all the data members. So I would pass first argument as name, second as USN, third as semester, fourth as branch, and fifth one as CGPA. Okay, so I'll do inside constructor initialization, name equal to n, USN equal to u, then semester equal to s, branch equal to v, CGPA equal to c. So this is the parameterized constructor. CGPA. Yeah. All right. Now you can have a display function here and just display everything of the students, name, USN, semester, branch, then is CGPA. And then. Okay, so this is a simple method that I want to have. Okay, so once you define the class for the student, initialize all data members through the constructor, you can call the method.
So put this in namespace now. Make it more.
Pardon?
Sir, have one namespace.
Oh, you want namespace, fine. So namespace, call it as some college, let's say RVC. So in the same namespace, I can have another class also. I can have class, let us say branch. Yeah, you can have marks. So here we can have all the subjects.
Subject also.
Yeah. So what we can do is, yeah, all subjects of 0 I have to initialize with the DBMS. All subjects of 1 I have to initialize CN. It should actually take array initialization for strings also.
Sir, you can take a parameterized constructor na, where person can pass the subject and
those I can do, but initialization has to be done one by one like this. It doesn't apply the way I have initialized marks, no. Same way, it should have taken a string of array of strings like this in flower brackets, but it's not taking.
Okay.
And just to play around with constructor like this, we can do. And yeah. So this is a default constructor, and then you can say float compute CGPA. you can use the loop to compute something. For int I equal to 0, I less than 5 subjects are there, I plus plus, you can take a local variable float CGPA, which is initially 0, and here you can say CGPA equal to all marks, not just marks, right? Marks of I multiplied by 2, okay, divided by some formula you have to use to compute these things. You can use plus here, so that each marks is multiplied by a fraction. You can use put this thing and assume that using this formula the CGPA is computed after the loop is over, and you just have to return CGPA. Okay. So in a real scenario, you should know what is the exact formula to compute the CGPA. And here you can have a method void display, which will display all the subjects for int I equal to 0, or you can use for string x colon all subjects, and you can use cout x, displays in between. So it will display all the subject, and that one will calculate the CGPA, and this is where the class should end. This is where the student is ending, this is where the class marks will end. Okay, and using namespace RVC, so that is the only namespace we have, and you can directly use the student and marks, like student yes it, okay, yes bracket name of the student Samajay, then is USN to 21 CS 001, then I think so it is semester, third semester. So as you can see, it is coming with the context help that it is expecting the branch now. So double quotes branch CSE, and last one is
Note C.
what is that C is for?
C is just
C is for CGP only. Okay. Let's say 7.5. So this first object created, and then if I say yes dot display, it will do that. So let's first check only the student class, whether it, yeah, Ajay USN 3 semester CGPA 7.5. Okay,
yes.
and if I create that marks M1 bracket, and we only have default constructor here, if I'm not wrong, yeah. Okay, and if it is default construct only, I don't have to put this bracket also. M1 dot compute CGPA, and it is returning something you can see out here. CGPA equal to this, yeah, and M1 dot display. So let's check. Yeah, CGPA is 8, DBMS and what the subject it is displaying. So if you wanted a little spacing, you can do that using Yandel here. All others, please try these programs. I will be putting up the assignments also related to what we discussed today, and we shall see on Monday the other details. All right.
Yes, sir.
Okay then. Bye.
Sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.